Appreciate you for joining us for a really remarkable panel, something very important. We were absolutely certain we were going to have both a Command Sergeant Major and a Sergeant Major panel, as well as a Warrant Officer panel, because those are different perspectives that really matter, and we all know that. And particularly when you look at the complexity of what was described by our morning speakers, that really showed a variety of integration challenges, a variety of convergence between the various disciplines, and doing it in a way that was quick, fast, gave speed, and that whole idea of the unified network, making it work for soldiers. And when you talk about making anything work for soldiers, you immediately turn to sergeant majors. And so that's why this was a very important point and panel to bring home with some great speakers, which we have with us today. We're glad they're here with us to expand on some of the subjects maybe they were able to hear this morning, but obviously to be guided by two moderators. In fact, there were going to be 6 panelists. We have 4 for the variety of operational reasons you can imagine right now in the particular commands where they were coming from. But we no less have a remarkable set of talent that is more than ready to talk about this panel's topic. Led by our moderator, we worked to help put this together. Gentleman to my right, if you're anywhere in CSRA land, you know this gentleman. You know him. He is not shy about his affection for the area, affection for these soldiers and the mission. Now, I have a problem because he's also a doctor, he's a sergeant major, and he has a first name. And I am unable to call a sergeant major by his first name. It's just inherently a problem I have. So I settled on doctor just because it sounds cool. And indeed he is, and well-talented, and he's our Dr. Clark, Sergeant Major Clark, who is going to be our moderator and kick off introducing the panel and introducing the topic. So ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a treat. Please welcome our panel.
Mic check, can you hear me? Okay.
There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon Cyber District, welcome to the Senior Enlisted Leader Perspective on Supporting Decision Dominance. I'm Command Sergeant Major Delia Quintero, Command Sergeant Major for the Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon. And of course, as already stated, I am joined by Command Sergeant Major retired Dr. Tom Clark, and we are definitely excited to be your moderators for this amazing panel. Just so you know, we did specifically choose this panel just because of their diversity on how they're dealing with this space and the organizations that it lead. We wanted to make it a joint platform that we're able to talk in that aspect as we fight together as service members, and then of course at the higher level of the Department of the Army. So it is unfortunate we had 2 of our members that were not able to be here due to mission, and it would have brought us full circle, just being on the combatant commanding side, the operational side, and of course at the higher level for the Army. So as we mentioned, our panel members, prior to our 2 other members not being here, but collectively they have 122 years worth of service. They've all served at the most senior enlisted member of an organization and are appointed to serve as an advisor to a commanding general or a combatant commander on all things that affect decision-making up to the highest level of the Department of Defense or the Army, and serve as a spokesperson for all service members within their organization. But before I hand it over to my co-moderator, I'm sure a lot of you know him, but I'll be remiss if I don't identify some of the accomplishments that he's had. And he is a great person and friend, but he is a retired Command Sergeant Major with over 30 years of service. And prior to retiring, he did serve in the same position I'm currently serving. So as you know, Dr. Command Sergeant Major retired Tom Clark, former Command Sergeant Major at Fort Gordon and the Signal Regiment. He is a certified project manager professional, currently serves as the executive director for the Alliance for Fort Gordon. He was named as one of Georgia's Trends and James Magazine, 100 Most Influential Georgians in 2019, 2019, 2020, and 2021. He serves as a commissioner on the Georgia Joint Defense Commission. Dr. Clark also has a master's degree in post-secondary adult education from Troy University and a doctorate in management in organizational leadership from Phoenix University. Dr. Clark, sir, over to you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and we're so glad my friend in battle can make it back. And she formed this panel, so they said it was me, but it was Sergeant Major Quintero who got this group of dynamic individuals together. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again, my friend, for that great introduction. As Command Sergeant Major mentioned, over 122 years of service on this panel. That's 12 decades. I'm almost 6 decades old. That's a lot of Ben Gay. And a plethora of knowledge, right on this panel alone, 15 Bronze Stars, 8 higher education degrees. They have almost every skill badge that the military awards sitting in front of us. They are combat proven on multiple deployments into our areas of operations around the world, and they represent the top 1% of the enlisted corps for their prospective service. So as I introduce them, forgive me if I get excited, and please hold your applause until everyone is here. But we have Command Sergeant Major Cheryl Lyons.
He does that so well.
I feel like a MMA. She is the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Cyber Command and National Security Agency. She entered the Army in 1991 and has over 30 years of service. Her previously served as a Command Sergeant Major of the Army Service Component Command level for U.S. Army Europe and Africa, and was the Command Sergeant Major of U.S. Army Cyber Command. She's earned the Master Parachutist Badge, the Basic Aviator Crew Badge, and the Military Intelligence Corps Association Nollington Award. I won't call him Sergeant Major because he's corrected me once already, and he said, I am Master Gunnery Sergeant Scott Stalker from the United States Marine Corps. He is the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Space Command. He enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1993 and has over 28 years of service. He previously served as a Command Senior Enlisted Leader for the NSA and United States Cyber Command and for the Defense Intelligence Agency. He has a BA in Intelligent Analyst, a Master's of Science in Cybersecurity, and he's currently pursuing a Master's of Arts in Military History. He's also completed a course of study at the Harvard Kennedy School, and he actually has earned the Army Air Assault Badge. So, me too, brother. I only got like one, but there it is. Sergeant Major Jack Love. He is from Headquarters DA. He is the Sergeant Major. He is the G357 Sergeant Major at the Pentagon. He enlisted in 1989 and has over 32 years of service. He's the former Command Sergeant Major of the United States Military Academy in West Point and also the Command Sergeant Major of United States Army Cadet Command. He's earned the Ranger Tab, the Combat Infantry Badge, the Expert Infantry Badge, the Parachuted Badge, the Air Assault Badge, a lot of badges. Ditto for Sergeant Major Jack Nichols, Command Sergeant Major for Army Cyber Command. He entered the Army in 1989 and has 32 years of service. He previously served as the FORCECOM G6 Sergeant Major and the Headquarters DA G6 Sergeant Major. He's been awarded the Combat Action Badge, the Expert Infantry Badge, the Master Parachuted Badge, the Master Military Freestyle Badge, the Pathfinder Badge. He's got badges going around his back. He holds a bachelor's degree in business and management and I'm sure I can speak for our audience as well as AFCEA by extending our greatest appreciation to each of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today and share your incredible wealth of knowledge and experience as we engage in this complicated and complex topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and give our panel a great Augusta and Fort Gordon welcome.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. So just before we get started into the question and answer session, I do want to set the stage, give you some thoughts on decision dominance to level set our audience and our panel members. We have already heard from several guest speakers and thinkers who have shared their perspective on information advantage, unified network operations, and other related topics. So why the transition to decision dominance? Is there a connection? Let's take a look at the meaning. Decision dominance is a desired state in which a commander can sense, understand, decide, act, and assess faster and more effectively than an adversary. When applied to a logic approach or framework, we find that commanders seek to achieve decisive dominance by gaining and maintaining positions of relative advantage over our adversaries. A position of relative information advantage will enable the commander and his or her force to hold the initiative in terms of relevant actor behavior, situational understanding, and decision-making using military capabilities. Achieving decision dominance is not simply applying the science of current and future technologies. It is a combination of science and art of mission command. As stated earlier, information advantage, decision dominance is leaders' business. Today, we will invite our panel members to share their perspective on how the force can best operate in the information environment, in competition through conflict, how to advise commanders in their decision-making process to achieve decision dominance, and how they best manage talent and capabilities at their level to enable them to sense, understand, decide, act, assess faster and more effectively than our adversary. I will now turn it over to our panel members to give us their opening comments, and then we'll move into the question and answer session. Command Sergeant Major Lyon.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. I appreciate that. So I was laughing as we were all sitting together earlier and we were discussing this because every one of us had to pull out our glasses before we could read anything. So 30 years plus, I guess they're well deserved after this amount of time. So I want to thank AFCEA for putting this together. You know, it's been a couple of years since we were able to do this in person. There's been a lot of things that have gone on, so bringing this back again, thank you very much for that. And also for the CCOE for putting this panel together and making sure that we are on target here. And to Dr. Clark, thank you so very much. And no, he's a hard act to follow, so great enthusiasm, truly appreciate that. But we live in a world of information dominance, everybody. I mean, Cyber Command, NSA, I speak in cyber terms. It touches everyone's life. And whether you pick up a phone or whether you have some type of billing system that's on the net, everybody is touched by cyber, that information in the information space. So any given day, there's upwards of 80 million to 80 billion probes on the DoD networks alone. So I mention that to say that we are always engaged, always engaged. Now, while they are not all malicious, I will guarantee you that they are all learning something. So persistent engagement. If we wait until there is an all-out cyber attack, then we're too late. We can't wait until then. We will not be able to mitigate. So we stay engaged every day in the fight. Stating that we must always be engaged, this also emphasizes the need for partnership and collaboration, and that was the area that I was going to focus on today. You know, Cybercom, NSA has a large hat. They really, really do. But we can't do this alone. And that's why I emphasize the fact that cyber touches everyone. It touches the industry base. That's why many of you are here. You have a part in this. And how do we work this together? It affects academia. We work with them. It affects the other government agencies. It affects the intelligence community as a whole. And as a whole, we have to work together to establish partnerships and collaboration in order to maintain information dominance. There are things that are experienced on the civilian sector that we do not experience on the DoD side of the house. And to that end, we must collaborate so that we know everything, all the capabilities, lessons learned, and best practices. The Secretary of Defense, let me be correct, states that we need to and will operate in a world of integrated deterrence. What does that look like? What will it look like in the future? And it's extremely important that we establish that. This reinforces our need to collaborate across the spectrum. We must use a whole-of-nation approach and not a singleton approach. I failed to mention earlier those partners that we collaborate with, to include our foreign partners and our allies. These are important as it is imperative to share those lessons learned, as I mentioned, so that we can win the misinformation war, the disinformation war, and collaborate to prevent situations, colonial pipeline, occurring again. I caution people to think about that as a small piece of the capabilities that our adversaries have the capability of performing against us. And so, for the future, what does that look like? What does integrated deterrence look like? And how do we prepare for that and maintain a persistence engagement against other state actors? Thank you.
Thanks, CSM. First off, thank you for having me, and CSM, thank you for the invitation, the phone call requesting me to be here. Let me start with the 17th of December, 2010. That was a day that in Tunisia, an individual who had had enough of being bullied by local police and others in the government decided to light himself on fire right in the middle of the street. He was a Tunisian street vendor. Lit himself on fire to protest the abuse of the government. That incident led to a single photo being captured and a tweet being sent out, and later what many would refer to as the Arab Spring starting that single moment on the 17th of December. Now, if you were to look at history, that single event, a non-kinetic fire, led to the overthrow and the topple of more governments than several wars that we've had in history. And so if you're not quite certain how the information environment can shape opinion, motivation, and will, I just refer you to that single incident in Tunisia, and there are many other incidents like that. So at Space Command, what are we doing to aid commanders, decision makers, national security leaders in this fight? Well, one of the things we pride ourselves on is making sure that we can see, characterize, and understand the battle space, that we can provide kinetic and non-kinetic effects to commanders, and that we have dispersed capabilities to make it a decision dilemma on our adversary. And you heard some comments about what information advantage is. Our adversaries have invested heavily in the abilities and the capabilities to make sure that we cannot see, characterize, and understand the battle space. Whether that be the use of lasers, jamming, or direct ascent missiles to actually kinetically take out a space-based capability, we know that we rely heavily on our capabilities in space as both a society and a department. And so what I'd offer as we go through this conversation and as you go through the week and your day, think about how we utilize space to enable decision. And lastly, I always say this: we can have all the exquisite capability in the world we want, but it is not a capability until it's trained and rehearsed. And so we've got to really think of the information environment. How do we train in exercises, not white card it so that we can get to the kinetic fires, but train and rehearse, utilizing all the threats of cyber, the capabilities that we can use to take our capabilities away in space, and the information environment, which I have just started to call the environment because I don't know where the information environment begins and ends. It's everywhere. It truly is just an environment. So ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to the questions and answers today, from learning from my peers and friends. Thank you again for the invitation.
2 tough acts to follow. Am I transmitting, sir?
Yes.
Test. Okay, I apologize. Hey, thanks to all the teammates over here. I mean, they really are a class act in every sense of the word. And sir, to you, thanks again. You know, I'm probably the only infantryman on the panel, so I probably have the least to add to this topic, but I think it's important to get a perspective in some sense as it affects the warfighter. But when I think about information advantage, you know, both the current Army and the multi-domain operational Army that we are working towards for 2035, really, really important that we can compete with our adversaries in this space across the continuum of competition and if needed, into conflict. And really just get better operating in this space, not just as an Army, but as all of our services. Very, very important. As you know, everything we do in our military will be about the joint force, and that's critically important. And because information advantage is such a priority right now across the Army and across the military, I will tell you in the G357 in the Pentagon, we've really accelerated this effort to make it a priority. We actually created a directorate about a year ago where we had a lot of stovepiped organizations. We brought them all together and created a directorate called Strategic Operations. It's led by a 2-star general officer, and there's some tremendous talent focused on this space of information advantage and how it can help us achieve success on the battlefield, both today and into the future. So I'll pause there and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me? All right. Thanks for the opportunity, sir. Sergeant Major. Look forward to the week throughout. A couple of things I'd like to highlight is, you know, Sergeant Major Love is my battle buddy. We were up at the HQDA together, and you know, he highlights something about the infantrymen providing the information, and you know, how do we resource that for them to make the decisions. You know, as we operate, defend, attack, and influence through our cyber, you know, it's how do we get that relevant information, that data fast enough to provide him information to support the operations that they need to make decisions on. So as I look at the information environment, it's getting that data, collecting it, you know, working with the teammates. But what I've recognized over the time is, getting young soldiers to understand kind of how to provide that information. You know, it's working with the schoolhouse, it's working with the soldiers and getting them the training that they need to also understand this. Because it was highlighted this morning, a question was brought up to Lieutenant General Morrison regarding, the training and how do you get the soldiers out there to understand this space. And it's the leaders, as the sergeants major all kind of spoke of, speaking of the space, speaking of what we've got to do to influence. As was also presented was the DODN. Through our cyber, NetCom is a big piece of our cyber and provides all that network and that information and supports the warfighter. As we look at what the warfighter's doing and supporting them, getting them relevant information at the speed to make decisions is really critical. But what I've also identified was, as you start looking at that from my seat at ForceCom is understanding like the ESBE and ITN networks. How do you get that information, those systems operational, up online and the network connected so that it's all tied in to provide those quick, analysis of that information. It's the working with the intel soldiers, the EW soldiers, SEMA, and as well as the cyber soldiers, integrating those soldiers into the workforce, but also looking at kind of the direction that we're going with, kind of supporting them in MDO and the multi task force. But again, as I see it, is that as we start doing this, it's critical to understand the complexities of the equipment that young soldiers operate. The complexities of the systems that they're going to provide, and the information that they're going to give leaders, and that it's timely. But that it's also, that they've run through understanding what risk may be on their systems. Kind of how to, when it's not operating. And a lot of times, AI has kind of been providing us a lot of the press the green button, point it south, and it auto-acquire an antenna. But in contested and congested environment, doesn't necessarily always work that way. And that's kind of some of the things that, I'd highlight, throughout the week is that, working with the soldiers and providing them, kind of the information. Right now we do a lot of net nef and fielding these nice systems. But again, as I look at it, so providing the warfighter the information is that they've got to also be able to operate those when it is contested. But I look forward to the conversation, and thanks for the opportunity.
We'll start the Q&A. Paul, if you can put the link up for everyone to see, but we do have some questions that we've gotten already.
So just remember for the audience, if you just joining us, as Dr. Clark mentioned, we have some questions already, but please provide your questions onto the link and we'll be more than happy to answer them for you. But the first question I have is to Command Sergeant Major Lyon. In your current role, you have stated that your operators typically consider coding to be another language, and as such, helps to establish and solidify the relationship between Cyber Command and NSA and their entities. Can you comment on coding as a language as it pertains to information advantage?
So that's why I used the opening comments that I did, because I spoke of partnerships and collaboration. So the greatest partnership that Cyber Command has is the one that they have with the National Security Agency. So nearly 72 years of experience on the signals intelligence side of the house. They have over 120 different languages that are spoken at NSA. And when I talk to young cyber warriors, I call them cyber warriors, so don't be offended. When I talk to young cyber professionals, cyber warriors, and ask them about their training, we talk about having to learn how to code, how to learn the language. And that 72 years of experience, when you add that to the ability to write code, it is another language. They understand it. That's what they speak as well. That's what they live and breathe, and that's how they communicate with each other and the rest of the world. So that relationship there is built upon the capabilities that both bring to the warfighter and to the fight, and it compounds the capability of being able to ferret out those actors, other state actors, who are trying to inflict harm upon our networks. So to that respect, it brings them the capability of compounding and, can't think of the word I want to use, being able to mitigate our adversaries' actions. So that language is prevalent in their information dominance and to take part in that capability.
Very good. One of the other questions we have is for Master Gunnery Sergeant Stalker, but probably could go to all the panel members to expound on because of the level of leadership that you serve. But Master Gunnery Sergeant, you sit in a very unique position as the Senior Enlisted Leader of Space Command, and can you expand on your unique partnership and collaborations there as it pertains to information advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could, before I take that, I'd like to just shoot on the same target a moment ago. I think if Sergeant Major Lyon was wrong, we wouldn't have updated JP1, Joint Pub 1 in 2017 and included information as a 7th warfighting function. So for what it's worth, I fully agree with the sentiments of language and coding being equal there. So to your point, sir, I think I have got two things I'd like to raise. One, we no longer at Space Command really refer to it as a whole of government approach to anything. We really refer to it as a whole of society. Whole of society is inclusive of academia, it's inclusive of industry, it's inclusive of partners and allies, because in the space environment, in the operating environment, in the warfighting domain that we're in, we rely heavily on our partners and allies. Not just the Five Eyes, which is what I was used to as an intelligence professional, but France, Germany, Japan, some of the non-traditional nations you may not be used to dealing with. We bring them on board. We have agreements with them. They work on our operations floor. In the same token, with our commercial integration cell at Vandenberg Space Force Base, we have cleared defense contractors, TSSCI, working right there with uniformed members on our watch floor so we can see, characterize, and understand the threat together, and we can build capabilities to get after that. If we didn't use industry, think of what we were doing a few years ago, writing millions of dollars of checks to the Russians in order to put capability and people into space. Today we can use, as an example, SpaceX, who not only can get us there cheaper and faster, but can return the rocket to reutilize that. And so the technology, the advancements of industry is a strategic advantage for the United States, and it's something we use a lot. I would say, again, one of the other things, too, as I talk about the whole of society approach, the Secretary of Defense recently released a memo, and it was for us, but it was really messaging all of the responsible actors in space, that we have got to understand how we're going to act responsibly in space. In some ways, some would characterize it as the Wild West. I would not myself, but I would say that document highlights the fact that we can't just be operating willy-nilly up there. Today alone, we're tracking over 32,000 pieces of debris in space. We got to utilize our partners, our allies, industry, academia, everyone on board so that the Wild West is not what the space domain is going to be. And so absolutely, sir, we use partners and allies specifically so that, again, we can provide as much information advantage to the commanders and decision makers that are out there.
Very good. Anyone else from your unique position? All right, Paul, any questions from the audience?
Sure, we have a few questions. First, how does any corps or division achieve information advantage in large-scale combat operations?
I'll start, and I would say it goes back to my previous comment. You do not begin by starting exercises in what we would think of as a phase 2 or phase 3, where it's maneuver and kinetic environment. You have to begin to the left of that, where you're exercising the shaping of the environment. You're exercising cyber capabilities, whether that's offensive or defensive, and you're utilizing all of the space-based capabilities we have. Because if we don't do that, again, it's not a capability until it's exercised and rehearsed. It's just a box. It's just a thing. And if people are truly our most important part of the team, they've got to exercise this and play this. Otherwise, we're going to send corps, divisions, battalions, brigades, you name it, squadrons, ARGs, forward as a joint force. And for the first time, they're going to say, hey, soldier, here you go. And I think that's the wrong way to execute mission.
And I'd add to that too, kind of goes back to what I was highlighting regarding the force comm side of the house and kind of making sure those soldiers understand those platforms that they are operating on, but also ensuring that the commanders understand the capabilities of those platforms and what the soldiers provide. As we start to look at some of the workforce that we're giving to the divisions and corps, is that you got a cyber expert out there, you got the SEMA guys, you got the the intel, and you're getting all that information to make informed decisions based on speed, right? And a lot of that kind of it takes the information, the data that we spoke of this morning, and getting that timely data to make those decisions before the adversary has a chance to make a decision.
I think that lends itself back to the persistent engagement that we spoke of earlier. In simplest terms, cyber never sleeps. And if you are waiting for the state actor to be aggressive, well, they already are that. And if you're trying to keep it out of, or at the level of non-kinetic, then there's no better capabilities than those that cyber brings to the table to prevent that from happening and to escalate. But once you get there, that information dominance, we have to be to the left. We can't wait until the right. It just would not be successful on any measure.
Okay, so sticking with moving to the left, we've got several questions about training and gaps. So the first one is, as a senior leader, how do you identify, select, and train the right talent?
Jack, I'm going to let you take that first.
So as we look at that, the CCOE does a fantastic job in getting the 17 Charlies, for instance, just using the 17 career field as a discussion point. The thing is what we have to do is continue to educate those soldiers throughout the process. Now, the problem with that is that, everything changes, and it changes fast. So, getting the most dynamic persons into the field and kind of putting them through the training costs a lot of money. To get those soldiers trained and ensuring we have the right talent, we put them through a series of, training opportunities. Once again, it comes at cost. But then it's a retention piece at a certain point too that I've identified, and I think everybody on the panel can kind of attest to this. That how do you keep those highly qualified soldiers within the workforce? We've kind of looked at things to kind of say, hey, those highly qualified soldiers, we kind of we've got to incentivize it. As I look through the audience and kind of going through the downstairs, is that what we pay them doesn't, scale in many instances, because we got some really highly qualified soldiers. But we look at it from the warrant officer's perspective, the officer perspective, how do we keep those soldiers? But through the training aspect of it, we look at all kinds of venues. We afford the direct commissioning, we afford the warrant officer program, we try to send them out to schools and get education. But it's also, based on what they are highly qualified in, there is a bonus added to it, so they get an AIP or SDAP, special duty assignment pay, or an incentive pay to support that. But again, it's identifying those soldiers when they're young, when they're coming through. Currently we have a lot of soldiers as they assess in just the basic assessments for cyber. Many of them come in a little later in their lives, about 23 years old is what we're kind of finding out. And most of them already come in with degrees. But then of course they've already kind of idea where they want to go, what they want to do, and what they want to perform. And they come in, they do what they got to do, and sometimes it's very hard to retain them because they've got those skills prior to getting out. But I'll shift over to anybody else on the panel.
Hey, the only thing I'd add on that is kind of the perspective I bring today is at the combat command level is General Dickinson will set the conditions as to what do we want a space operator to meet. And so I'm not looking so much today at what the schoolhouse is doing, which, by the way, I'd like to thank the Army for how they're helping train our 17XX Marines, doing an excellent job. But what I'm looking at is a measurement of effectiveness. And so all of the things that they bring and then they're operating, is it actually meeting the standard? Is it actually able to execute? And how has it evolved from a counter-violent extremist operation to great power competition and China and Russia? Because that threat is no longer in space specifically a benign environment. It is a warfighting domain, and we've got to make sure that individuals come to us with a sense of urgency, with a sense of that this is a warfighting domain, and they're ready and prepared. So we're looking at all of those from the perspective of the Combat Command to make sure that the end product we get across the Joint Force meets the conditions to execute in that warfighting domain. And we've had to evolve that training because it certainly has evolved. When Space Command first stood up in '85 and then folded the flag in '02, a relatively benign environment, and that's no longer the case. So I look exactly at what you're saying, Sergeant Major, but also at the end result product. Do we have it right, and if not, how do we evolve that?
Going with that a little bit more, there's another question about, given the speed at which technology specific platforms are evolving or changing, what are your thoughts on training on a system versus training the fundamentals? How do you prepare for that kind of environment?
I guess I'll go, I look at it as theory-based training, right? So I had the opportunity several years ago to do theory, understanding kind of SHF, single channel, multi-channel, and just rather than buttonology of understanding kind of how the system, because for instance, if you look at some of the small dishes, you press the green button, point it south, it auto-acquires, finds the dish, or finds the satellite. But in the contested environment, that probably is not going to work. The AI piece may go out at some point or whatever, and the soldier has to understand where that particular satellite may be in the constellation of satellites, right? So, understanding where the 105 bird, the 23 bird, 100 bird, when they're looking at those kind of things, it's kind of some of the troubleshooting that soldiers need to be able to understand. But it's also understanding kind of the signal flow of how everything works. Because if they're just learning the buttonology, it doesn't necessarily support the troubleshooting when the thing doesn't work. And as we have had many FSRs come out there, I like what the Navy kind of does. I remember them telling me that they don't have a Radio Shack in the ocean. So nobody's there. They have to fix it themselves. But it's also, kind of going back to the, understanding. I just remember learning a multimeter. It kind of helped out quite a bit over my career of how to employ or fix a cable that may have been broke. Understanding pinouts and everything else, but also understanding how to terminate fiber and all those. So I think that, along the lines of that is, learning the theory of the communications platforms versus learning the buttonology of the platform.
Hey, all I'd say is everything I ever talk about is the importance of the basics and fundamentals. We have an adversary today that can impact any of our operations across all domains, not just multi-domains, but all of our domains. And if we are not able, as a warfighting organization, able to do the basics and fundamentals, then we are not going to survive and win. And so basic things like out at sea, as we use the reference there, doing MCON, so emissions control, being able to navigate old school so that we can get to where we need to be and not having to rely on GPS. It's nice to have, but if it goes out, can you still execute? The basics of GPS, the basics of land navigation with a map and compass, all those basic fundamental things, as I talk to any audience, we've got to be able to do those things. It's nice to be able to rely on the exquisite, but when you have an adversary that can take those things down, if you cannot do the basics fundamentals, then as a warfighting entity in an organization, we're going to suffer heavy casualties.
So I do have a question for Sergeant Major Love. What is the intended impact of this new construct of information advantage on commanders and staffs across the Army?
Well, I would say, you know, it really, we're in a persistent era where our adversaries will take advantage of every bit of information that they can gather, whether it's accurate or not. And so when you look at competition, as we attempt to leverage information in any form, ultimately to help us win, and then to use that source for our advantage. And what that really means for the Army, and really the Joint Force, is whether it's maneuver forces or reception companies across our nation, we have to have the ability to impact Army operations in our favor. You know, our chief says all the time, you know, people first, winning matters. You know, and there is no second place in combat. Winning is the only option. So it's really vital that every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marines understands this. I would also say that, you know, when we look at information advantage and how do we increase this staff integration across all the warfighting functions, to not just talk about it, but to truly exercise it, to put it in phase one of our plans, as was mentioned previously, so that we leverage the full spectrum of capabilities against adversary problem sets, both in competition, crisis, and in conflict. And I would just end with saying that, you know, I believe every organization has a role to play in this space, which comes down to gaining decision dominance over our adversaries, and then understanding that the concepts are really critical to nest with our higher headquarters and ultimately to win. So I hope that answered your question.
A question that came in for Sergeant Major Lyons. As we look at the SecDef statement on unified deterrence, what does that look like in the cyber realm or in relationship to other domains?
So as previously mentioned, you know, cyber affects everyone. And when you look across the domains for the warfighting functions, you cannot do any of them now without any of the others. So having that unified platform, that unity of effort, is going to be critical to the success of operations in the future. You can't talk about one without the other being affecting any of the others. And Sergeant Major, or Master Gunnery Sergeant Stalker mentioned earlier about information dominance and being in the space domain and what that looks like. And so that's a new realm for many. But figuring out how to fight that together is going to be critical to the ability to overcome the adversary and to stay in front of the adversary. We talked earlier a little bit about how the technology, it changes. So as fast as we make one and develop one technology, another is developed someplace else. And it's this continual engagement, persistent engagement that goes on, and it never ceases. You know, we can't let our guard down at any time, otherwise the adversary gets the upper foot. And so we have to be very cognizant of that and what it means to be able to work as a unified platform a single unified platform. We talk about the joint domain. And in this respect, I don't think it is just a joint domain. It is the industry, it is the civilian sector, it's academia, it's any of our foreign partners and our allies who work with us. Again, it goes back to that whole of nation, whole of society, as Master Guns likes to call it, and about being able to drive that into the future and ensuring that we have those solidified partnerships that will succeed.
Thank you. Mr. Paul, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do. For Command Sergeant Major Lyon, are there any formal or informal channels between industry and the military that you guys are sharing lessons learned or views about cybersecurity?
So I will tell you that there have been a couple of endeavors which lead to a couple of working groups. We have the Interactive Cyber Collaboration Center, and the reason why it was stood up was to allow us to be able to work with the civilian sector, the industry database or the industry base, and make sure that we could share as much of the lessons learned as we possibly could. You know, I technically work in an environment where many things are close hold, but you know, the way that cyber affects everyone, you can't do that. So there's been a number of endeavors that have made to be able to share that information. So that center is one of those. It is a collaborative environment that is unclassified. It does have the ability to move to the classified side of the house if that is a determination, and that is one of two efforts that have been made to ensure that we are able to collaborate with the industry base and share the technology and the information. FireEyes, I'm going to use them as an example. They were the ones who actually discovered the SolarWinds compromise, and so without them, it could have taken us longer as a whole to note that that had happened and that it had occurred. But I use that as an example of one of the best forms of collaboration and the abilities to work together and be able to share knowledge to the advantage of all.
So there are a couple of questions about the Georgia Cyber Center of Excellence and the money that's been involved. And they ask if you have identified gaps in the way that it's being approached now, and if so, how are you handling that? And the second part of that was, how are you preparing young cyber warriors? So they're looking to see, you know, bring them into the fold.
So there's 4 of us up here probably who could respond to that question. Was it directed or?
It was a general, and
Okay.
although one of them did say they want to hear somebody from a non-Augusta voice or viewpoint.
From a
So a lot of this stuff is focused on Georgia Cyber Center of Excellence. So they said, is there somebody that might, you know, other things that can be done outside of this area that might bring cyber warriors into?
So I think that, so if I'm hearing the question correctly, what are the other mechanisms that we have to bring in what we call cyber professionals or cyber warriors?
Or develop them, so students, young students.
Right. So it was mentioned earlier that we do have the direct commissioning program. We do have intern programs. We have fellowship programs. And for those, you're typically talking someone who's either studying in the field or has a propensity for that field. So assessments are really critical for that ability to find out whether somebody has or will have the capability to do those things. So these young generation of young adults that have come up with either a cell phone or a PC in their hand and the capability to write code and do all sorts of things with a computer, it's finding them and enticing them into come into the military or Department of Defense and to take advantage of what is a normal capability for them and to expound on that. I know Sergeant Major Nichols mentioned earlier some of the other things that they were doing within the cyber realm. If you think of our National Guard and Reserve brothers and sisters, they do cybersecurity every day, a lot of times for their day jobs. And so what does that look like when we try to inculcate that into the overall DoD picture? And they bring a lot of assets to the fight. So we can't exclude those either. But there's a number of endeavors that are being taken.
And also to add to that, Sergeant Major, was also the, they get the internships and the fellowships. Something that we've identified is that, you don't necessarily have to have, be really good at cyber in a sense, right? We could teach you some of those things too. Just have to have the talent and want to come into the space. So the internship actually provides that. Doesn't necessarily mean you can't have any cyberspace. You probably need some. But what they do is they go ahead and kind of align you to kind of bring you on board, give you some training to kind of get you into a certain work role or an area. Based on how skilled you are, kind of pay you commensurate to kind of that level. But there's also the opportunities to kind of get paid more, even on the civilian side of the house, as we start looking at the skills of some of our civilians and what they do. For instance, as I mentioned, AIP, SDAP for some of our military soldiers, our military members. Looking at the civilian sector side of the house, and our GS is offering them a 25% incentive. So, if you look at a GS 12 step 5, from my understanding, it's about 22 grand extra that they can possibly earn based on their special skills if they align to some of the work roles and being a master rated person within cyber.
And I'd like to add one thing, and that's the work study program. So the high schoolers, that program has taken off and doing pretty well. We don't have as many as we would like just yet, but word is getting around. Texas has done it, NSA Texas, and a couple of other places. So those, I think, are advantageous as well.
Just one more point to consider. A lot of great programs, all the different accession opportunities that service members can enter into the cyber arena. But in the military, we've also got this thing called in-strength. And that matters, and it really affects our structure. And so as we look to truly defining a multi-domain operational military, very, very important that we get this right so that we have the structure needed to fight and win. So. And real quick, I know I'm not by any means ending this, and I apologize sincerely, but I do have to depart. I've got a flight, and I greatly apologize. But I did want to leave, since I am in the great state of Georgia. I know there's always at least one, so I wanted to leave at least one of you a great Roll Tide.
Sergeant Major Love, thanks for that. Appreciate you making your way all the way from the Pentagon here to join us, so safe travels.
So we do have another question on the other end. Can you touch on what actions you're taking to collect data and then assess the retention of cyber talent? Specifically, are you talking to soldiers as they leave, why they're leaving? Do you know for a fact that it's money, or are there other reasons? And do you maintain communications with them after they've left?
So I think all four of us could probably answer that. Yes, we do exit interviews, and and we've also done a couple of surveys as well. And those surveys typically have the questions of what would it take to maintain you or keep you incentivized to stay in the military or service to Army Cyber or Cyber Command. So we get a lot of feedback on that, and we are using that to help us drive the programs to retain the capabilities and the skills. Excuse me. And if you, in regards to the question of if it's just about the money, I would tell you very adamantly that no, it's not just about the money. Can it help? Yes, in some instances it can help. But I will tell you that these young operators truly enjoy what it is that they do, and that's exactly what they want to be doing, are operations against other state actors to mitigate their capabilities.
So I'm not in that seat anymore, and I would not dare shoot on that target, but what I would offer is two things, is exactly that. It's not the money. I would have taken a pay cut to work with General Nakasone because I knew a couple things. One, he gave a damn. He loved his teammates. He loved me. He loved everyone on the team, and he would do absolutely anything for us, to include holding us accountable when we weren't performing to standard. And the other thing is, it's, again, not about the money. It's about inspirational leadership. If I've got someone who's inspiring, who I want to follow into the hell and back, more often than not, I'm going to do that regardless of what I'm getting paid. Money matters. Certainly, we've got to take care of our families. We want to do well. But I don't think that's always based on the exit interviews I saw, and I do keep in touch with many of them. Some of in the audience I've seen since I've been here today, I don't think it's always about that. And I imagine most of us that get out, whether after 4 years or 40, we look for something that we are looking forward to doing in the morning. We wake up and say, I get to do this, instead of I have to do this. And it's not necessarily about the money.
And I'll just go ahead and add on to that, absolutely about the leadership piece of it as well. I mean, you're working for some awesome talent. The soldiers are asking for that. That's what a lot of them kind of look for, want the opportunities to do the leadership piece of it. But, we also look at kind of what's the growth within what they're doing. As the opportunities, the mission, that's what the soldiers really want. And that's what I hear quite a bit about, and what I like to have these particular opportunities. Now, kind of goes back to, when Dr. Clark was kind of highlighting, the badges and everything else, for the panel. Their currency is a little bit different than what my currency was, right? I wanted to go to free fall school. I wanted to go to jump school. These soldiers want to do different things. They want to have the opportunity to go to this particular type of course. They want these types of systems. They want to operate on these kind of things. They want to be able to perform in these particular work roles and areas. And I think that that's what drives it. And a lot of times, just the discussion between the soldier, the leader, and the organization of what's really in the realm of possible. As we look at the expansion of kind of what we're doing within cyber, it's even the opportunities to get out there in those force comm formations and working out in, divisions and corps and supporting the cyber work role. But, again, sometimes it's what's the currency, not a lot of them look at it as a divisions and corps, but there's a whole bunch of great things that are out there for the opportunities for soldiers to do and go see some awesome things. But that's what I had.
Amazing. We'll turn it back over to Sergeant Major Quintero for closing comments.
So I do have one last question. And we've talked about cyber operations, but more so the information space, which a lot of that is, the signal, cyber, electronic warfare. But when it comes to the organizations, that those warriors getting into that space, what does that mean in a maneuver operations for them? A lot of times it's, we talked about retaining talent. We talk about how do we keep them relevant, and we talk about understanding the platforms that they're working on. But how does all that translate to that warrior, or how do we translate it to our maneuver forces? And that's for anybody on the panel.
I think it starts with context. Whether you're an administrator, a logistician, acquisition, intelligence, operations, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, this leadership, commanders, and others need to be able to speak to their individuals that are in the J1, the G1, you pick it, and let them know how what they're doing relates to the mission and how it is so critical to what we do. One of the things I've banned at Space Command from saying is anyone that tells me I'm just a whatever, because we have fought so hard for every single billet we have at Space Command, and certainly as the Space Force, which is an entirely separate organization and service, has stood up, they have fought very hard for every single billet. And so there's no one on the field that's irrelevant, regardless if there's a contractor, a spouse, civilian, officer, enlisted, we're all a key contributor. And so context for leadership, you've got to get your folks to understand how what they're doing fits into it, because too often you may be sitting in a sensitive space, doing acquisition or whatever, and you're wondering, wow, does this mean anything? And just spending a few moments to say, hey, let me tell you how what you did contributed to the fight, to winning. And I think that really is where I apply a lot of my time, is making sure everyone in the organization understands the context, how it fits into the bigger picture, and why my Commander General Dickinson appreciates it.
Thanks for that. So I think that kind of wraps us up as far as question and answers. What I'll do is turn it over to each panel member just to give their closing remarks, and then we'll close it out. Sergeant Major Lyons.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. I appreciate it. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here. As I mentioned when I first started speaking, was that the information environment affects us all, each and every one. It doesn't matter what your role is, whether you're civilian, whether you're military, whether you're a logistician, whether you're an HR person. It affects each and every one of us. And it's a persistent environment that we are engaged in every day. And so I think that's important for everyone to understand, to know that you, each and every one of you plays a role in this. And so what does that look like? And I think it's very important that we all understand that we have a say in this as to what our future looks like.
Thanks, CSM. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here today. We asked earlier about integrated deterrence, and I think it's really switching the mindset. An example I used last week while I was with a group of Marines was, if you're at Camp Lejeune, do you think of it as a garrison environment, or do you think of it as Forward Operating Base Lejeune? And that's the mindset we've got to have. We got to understand that we may have to fight from our FOBs, from our camps, from our installations. So integrated deterrence, to me, is not multi-domain. I don't think that's good enough. It's all domain. It's understanding that we have cyber capabilities, but we may respond in the ground domain. We may respond in space, but we respond at the time and our place in our choosing. And it's also providing decision dilemmas for the adversary. So China may be in the Far East, but what if we respond in somewhere in Chile where they have interest, or Djibouti or Sri Lanka? And I think that's really the mindset we've got to get into, is it's no longer a flat map, and it's no longer multi-domain, it's all domain. I had a conversation a few hours ago before coming down here via SIPRNet email with a good teammate of ours, Fleet Master Chief Jamie Hurdell, who's in Central Command. He's a CSEL there. And he was going to join myself and CSM Lyons tomorrow for an event. He can't make it, obviously, for things that are going on in Afghanistan. And I know everyone has an opportunity to express their opinion and opine. What I'd ask is for all of us to keep in mind that we've sent thousands and thousands of Marine soldiers and joint service members over there to execute a mission. And they can certainly use your support. And so please make sure that there's a time and a place for opinions. But right now, let's support our folks going forward. I was going to beat up my good teammate here, CSM Love. He said he's the only infantryman up here. Every Marine's a rifleman.
That's right.
And everything I do is focused.
That's exactly what I thought about.
I can't see it because the light's there, but I hear some clapping, so hoorah. But everything we do at Space Command is focused on one thing, and that is winning. There is no silver medal. It is all about victory in combat and providing options to the commander. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you find yourself at Colorado Springs at Peterson Space Force Base now, we'd love to have a conversation with you about what we're doing so that we can present decision dilemmas to the adversary. Thank you all. God bless.
And thanks again once to the team, AFCEA as well, and the partners that were out here to, to do the displays and everything. I really appreciate that. One thing I'd like to just highlight is, the enablers. A lot of times we always talk about the infantryman, talk about the warfighter, we talk about that, but, what we spoke about quite a bit today was those enablers, those that allow you to assess, to understand and to decide and act on those particular networks, be it the tactical network or the operational networks. As we spoke this morning and you heard in the panels, a lot of conversation about the way we're moving forward. We don't necessarily know the answers to what right looks like just yet, but the feedback from the teammates out there is critical. It's kind of what I've understand over the years. Kind of a cyber soldier will go and speak. They call it the geek speak, right? But it's also got to be that understanding of kind of what geek speak means to the tactical, side of the house. How do you interpret that? How do you utilize that talent? And as we look at what we're doing with ITQs and, we're supporting those SEMA cells and what the divisions and corps change will be regarding MDO, I think that those are critical in the discussions that we're having. And, this is a great panel of teammates to have, just the way forward and understanding of kind of the direction we need to go. But I think across the board is that we do need some assistance. You don't know what right looks like, and if you got some feedback for us, we're always available as the sergeant's major and master gun. So, just give us that information as well. But that's all I have, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think this wraps up our panel. And again, it's awesome that that you all came and shared your thoughts and perspective. I do. It's clear in the discussion over the last hour that these senior leaders and really the senior enlisted leaders are in the fight, and we are in the fight. And it's truly a privilege to have you all here. It was an honor. So if everyone can just please join me in a round of applause for the panel. I would also thank you, the audience. I know you guys could either be, shaking hands, kissing babies, rubbing elbows down at the floor, and visiting all the vendors, but I definitely appreciate you guys being here and sharing this time with us to address this complicated but important topic as far as decision dominance. We all face many challenges in the information space, tough problems that require solutions now and in the future. I know we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and I'm also confident that we're heading in the right direction. Finding solutions is a team effort. We can't do it on our own, whether it's finding the right technologies to manage the data, unify our networks, enhance the commander's decision-making process, or finding innovative ways to educate our operators in the space. We rely on our partners across industry and academia to be a part of the solutions. Before I end, I do want to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Clark. I know, people said I put the panel together. Really, I just made the phone calls, and my friends here answered the call. But I had to leave, and Dr. Clark took point. He jumped on the grenade and actually put this entire panel together for us. So I do want to thank Dr. Clark, and please join me in a round of applause for him doing this. Thank you, everyone. Forge and project power. Victory starts here. People first. Winning matters. Semper Fidelis for my Marine counterpart, and Army Strong.
Well, thank you very much. On behalf of AFCEA, I want to tell you we appreciate what you've presented and the perspectives you've shared. It wouldn't be a Sergeant Major panel if I didn't hear about, or Master Gunny, leadership, teamwork, standards, expectations, and you didn't fail at all on that. You really reminded us why it's so important, regardless of the technology, regardless of the mission, to stay close to what we know really produces the results of good training, good leadership, good teamwork. Thank you very much for that. Perfectly technically qualified, and they don't speak in geek speak, right? But they do speak in soldier and Marine speak, and that helps a lot. Tom, thank you very much for what you put together, and to our audience, thank you. And for the panel, I'd like to let you know we're providing a donation as AFCEA to Fisher House to take care of our families. We're going to turn you loose in just a moment. Allow me, please, to one more time ask for your audience, thank the panel. We were going to move into an award ceremony for our Capture the Flag folks, but we'll do that at the beginning before we start the next presentation, which is at 3:15, when we are going to hear Colonel Josh Retz, the Chief of Staff of the 1st Special Forces Command. Please take an opportunity now. We're going to give you a little extra time to find the way to whatever best exhibitor or best conversation you wish to go to. We hope you're all back in here at 3:15. We're looking forward to a great presentation, very tactical and operationally oriented. I think a perspective you'll really appreciate. When you add it to this perspective and our perspectives tomorrow, this thing is on a roll, and we're thankful that you helped us get there and you continue to be on board. Thank you very much. See you at 3:15.